Kevin, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear.
Awesome. All right, sounds good. Perfect. So if you want to let me know when we're up and going, we'll just
Getting there, one moment.
sure take your time.
We're actually live. If you'd like to start, please do.
All right. Let's get this up here. All right, it is 6:30. To make the most of everyone's time, let's go ahead and get things going. I'm Jason Whiteley, so thanks for being here tonight. I work for WFAA here in Dallas, Fort Worth, and we have a political program on WFAA called Inside Texas Politics, and every so often we'll cover things in District 7, but I'm happy to be asked back here to cover the candidate forum, the 2021 virtual candidate forum. I was mentioning to one of the candidates a moment ago, just before we went on, that I think District 7 probably is the most engaged district in all of the city of Dallas. You guys are always involved, asking questions, just out there. So the other districts should be envious about what you all are doing. That said, you always field a number of candidates for city council, and to make the most of everyone's time, let's get right to it. Here are the basic rules tonight. We're gonna spend 15 minutes with each of the candidates, each of the 8 candidates who are running. We're going to visit with them in the ballot order. 15 minutes. At the very end, I'm going to save the last 60 seconds or so for closing statements, if you will, for each candidate. So it is 6:32 right now. Let's don't waste any more time. Get right to it. The first candidate you'll see on the ballot on May 1st is Kevin Felder. He is a former councilman for District 7. He is up first, and he is already on screen here with us. Thanks for being here tonight. We're going to start with all of our candidates with a simple question, so the folks here can really get to know you if they don't already. So let's start with how long you've lived in District 7, Mr. Felder. Secondly, tell us where you live, roughly. You don't have to give us your exact address, but roughly where you lived. And then finally, what type of community problems you have helped solve, and be as specific as possible. So the floor is yours, sir.
All right. First of all, thank you to the Buckner Terrace Homeowners Association for putting this on, and all of the other associations that are involved in this candidate forum. And thank you, Jason Whiteley, for being the host tonight. I have lived in District 7 continuously for 25 years in the same home. The general area is John West and Buckner. So I'm sorry, your second question?
Yeah, the second question is, the third part of that question is, I think you answered the first two. The third part is, what specific problems have you worked on to better the community?
Oh, quite a few. One of the things that I'm very proud of, Jason, is dealing with issues such as crime. I'm constantly meeting with my homeowners association, making sure that everybody reports crime when we have crime in the neighborhood. When I was on council, I took a hands-on approach, actually. I went door to door when the crime spiked, I believe in 2018, 2019. I went door to door with Chief Hall and her staff because there was a crime spike in Buckner Terrace as well as in South Dallas. And so we went door to door and we actually solved one of the crimes. And so that's the type of person that I am. I'm hands-on, and we were able to do something about it.
Well, Mr. Felder, let's talk about public safety for a moment here. We're all watching day 2 now of the trial up in Minneapolis of the former police officer who is on trial for killing George Floyd up there. Dallas just got a brand new police chief from California. Are there systemic problems at the Dallas Police Department that you would address, or is this city's department, does it have a better relationship with the community than other places?
Well, let me say that they can always be a better relationship with the police department. There have been problems in the past, and there are still problems now. I think at the end of the day, what we need to do, Jason, is make sure that the police department is more engaged with the community. I'd like to see the associations out in the community more, meeting with people and asking questions and finding out what is on people's minds, what are they going through. I hear it over and over as I go door to door campaigning, the gunshots. I hear it myself in my neighborhood. My neighbors hear it. So the gunshots is an issue. We're number one in crime in the city of Dallas in District 7. We're number one in murders in District 7. And so we have an issue here. And I think it was unconscionable for the current council person, Mr. Basil Dua, to take the overtime pay away from the police department and defund the police in that respect, because the police department is short some 500 to 700 officers. And so that is the reason why they were working overtime to begin with. And to take that away was not, it was not common sense. And so, the police department has responded, and they now have a billboard against him at the eastbound exit of I-30 and Longview.
Well, let's talk about that, because the reduction of police officers hasn't been an overnight thing. They've been falling off the ranks at DPD for years.
Yes.
And we're down. Last I heard was like 800 or so. Maybe your number's more accurate than mine. But
Right.
Some of that happened on your watch as well. What was Dallas police doing wrong, and why can't it get the numbers back up to where it needs to be?
Well, if we want to talk about what happened on my watch, I'm happy to talk about that, because I was one of the people that voted for a 20% pay increase to stop the police officers from leaving. So if it happened on my watch, I did what I could to stem the tide.
What are the other issues? You mentioned when I asked you the question about this that there are some specific things that the police department needs to do. What do you
Yes.
think the issue with policing is, and how do you get District 7's crime numbers down?
Again, the police need to be more engaged in the community policing, coming out into the community and engaging the citizens, asking what it is that we need to do. When I was on council, I asked specifically for a gun buyback. I haven't seen it yet. I asked Chief Hall for a gun buyback program, and I haven't seen it. I haven't had an opportunity to meet with the new chief, but I think that's one of the places to start. We need a gun buyback. We need to engage the citizens and find out, what is causing these issues. There are some root issues that cause this crime, but at the same time, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Felder.
There are some root issues that cause this crime, but at the same time, the police have to be more proactive. The community can do something. They can be more engaged. If you see something, say something. So I don't want to put all of the blame on the police department, but the community has to be engaged as well.
And you mentioned gun buyback. I mean, I just know at Channel 8 that I've covered gun buybacks from private organizations, from First United Methodist Church, downtown Dallas. I mean, there are other private organizations outside City Hall that do that. Have you organized one of those?
I attempted to. When I was a council member, I attempted to do that, and I didn't get the support from the police chief.
So you've been out of office for a couple of years. Let's talk now, Mr. Felder, about the three biggest challenges facing District 7, aside from public safety. You mentioned public safety there. Three biggest challenges, though, for District 7, in your opinion, are what?
Well, Jason, I'd have to say public safety is my number one, so I cannot gloss over that one. So since we've gone over it, I can go to the other two. And if you have further questions about that, I'll get into it. Homelessness. The homeless population has exploded in District 7. The Office of Homeless Solutions is underfunded and understaffed. So I would advocate for a 25% increase in funding and staffing of the Office of Homeless Solutions. When I was on council, we passed a $1 billion bond package. Only $20 million was earmarked for homelessness. And they just began to spend that money this year. I'm sorry, was it the end of 2020, beginning of 2021? They just began to spend the money. That's unacceptable. We have to do a better job. We have to make sure that we give wraparound services to the homeless. That is essential. The second thing is, you ready?
Yeah, absolutely. I just make
Okay.
sure you didn't forget. I
Okay.
was looking for one more too.
Okay, the economic development piece. I'm going to push for more corporate relocation in District 7. Small business retention and small business creation. We have to leverage the tools that we already have. We have a TIF in District 7. We have a PID in District 7. We have the South Dallas Fair Park Opportunity Fund. We have a neighborhood empowerment zone, and we have opportunity zones. I will work hard to bring quality grocery stores to District 7. And so those are the things that I want to do. I have experience. I've been on the council and I was very successful when I was there. And so I intend to come back and continue the good work that I did before I left.
Mr. Felder, you mentioned how you are a unique candidate here because you have been on council before. But again,
Yes.
with that experience, some of this stuff has happened on your watch when you were on council. Homelessness continued to grow and has continued to grow and outsmart City Hall. They can't figure out what to do. Small business retention and grocery stores as well too.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to say you specifically, but the city
Right.
itself during your time at City Hall wasn't successful in figuring homelessness out or
Right.
solving the food desert problem in District 7. So how is it going to be different this time if you're elected?
Well, again, we had just earmarked the money that we just had the bond pass in 2017. And so it takes time for the money to filter through the system, on the bond system. You have to buy the commercial paper, sell it on Wall Street. It doesn't happen overnight. So what I'm trying to say is that I did my part. When I was on council, I went to the homeless under the bridges, had lunch with them, found out who it is and found out who it was underneath the bridge and what type of situation they were in. And so that is the key. We have to define the problem and you have to first find out who it is that's under there. So I did everything that I could possibly do as a council person. Now that the money is filtering through the system and I can see it from another perspective, I can go back in and push harder with the city manager as well as the council.
Let's talk about the pandemic for a moment, because over the last 12 months, we've seen so many people across the city and in District 7 lose their jobs or
Yes.
lose hours
Yes.
working as well. You mentioned small business retention, economic development for District 7.
Mhm.
How do you make that work in an economy like this where the state's joblessness numbers are still high and higher than the national average? What's the secret?
Well, I mean, there's a combination. I mean, there had to be money coming from the CARES Act from the federal government. So the federal government had to step in to assist the cities and the states to keep businesses afloat.
Right.
With the PPP loans and things like that. So it's not a one-stop shop. It's not a all on the city of Dallas or anything like that. We had to work together in concert with the federal government in order to keep this country from collapsing, to keep small businesses from going under. And so the PPP loan was a very key component of keeping businesses afloat.
But as far as specifically what you at City Hall could do, or anyone who's elected from District 7 at City Hall to bring jobs, what's the magic thing here?
Well, the first thing is, I don't know what you know about my background. I am in corporate real estate. I'm a real estate broker, and I've done corporate relocation for the last 25 years. And so I understand the corporate relocation model and how it works. And so having that information, having that skill set, I have the relationships with people at the ERC, the Employee Relocation Council, and we can talk about what we can do for businesses to come to Dallas and come to the District 7. And so having that experience makes the difference. So that gives me the edge.
Who are your top 3 campaign contributors?
Jason, I have many that have contributed at the maximum amount. So I don't have them at hand. I didn't know you were going to ask me that question, but I have many that have maxed out at the $1,000 level.
Now you know me, and you never know what I'm going to ask, so I'll give you that part. But you know that a journalist might ask you some stuff like that. Here's another.
Okay.
I have another thing I'm going to ask everybody too, just how well they know the district. You've lived there for years, that you mentioned earlier. Do you know
Yes.
how many libraries are in District 7?
Wow.
This is the
I,
quiz on the
I,
district.
I'm going to guess and say we probably have 7 libraries.
7.
Yes.
All right. I think the number's about half that
Okay.
from what I found.
Okay.
We have about 3 minutes left here. I do want to ask you a couple of the things, and then I want to
Sure.
give you your minute to address voters directly as
Okay.
well too. You laid out a number of things: food desert, public safety, homelessness, economic development. But if elected to city council, Mr. Felder, day one, what's your priority? What do you tell your staff? This is what we're doing first. Clear your desks. This is what we're doing first. What is that?
We are going to get into the communities and find out what it is that the communities want from us. Um, Jason, you may or may not know this, but I gave more town hall meetings than any other council member ever. I gave 50 town hall meetings when I was the council person in District 7. I'm very proud of that. Communication, communication, communication. You have to communicate with the constituents. I did that, and I will continue that. But also listening, listen, 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 communicate, 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 and visit, visit, visit. That is the key to being a successful council member.
And we do have 60 seconds left here. I want to go ahead and give you the final word on this. You can speak for 1 minute and address the voters directly before we move to the next candidate. The floor is yours.
Thank you. To the voters, you know me. I was your council person for 2017 to 2019. I served you well. Senior citizens, I visited you on Valentine's Day. I visited you Thanksgiving, visited you on Christmas, and made sure that you were taken care of. To the voters, I will work in your behalf. I always put people over profits. One example, when there was 2 batch plants tried to come to Joppy, I stood with the citizens, and I chose the citizens over profit. The car wash on MLK, you said that you wanted the car wash gone. I stood with the citizens over profit. I'm number 1 on the ballot. My name is Kevin Felder. I have been your council person. Experience makes the difference. There are many candidates in this race, but there are none that have the experience that I have. I'm number 1 on the ballot. Kevin Felder for council.com. My phone number is 214-240-7759. I am easy to access. I'm willing to work with anyone. I need your vote. Please vote for me. Thank you so much to Channel 8 and to the Buckner Terrace Homeowners Association, as well as the other partnering associations.
All right, Mr. Felder, thank you so much. We appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate it.
Mr. Felder was going to be first on the ballot. Second on the ballot, you'll see, is Donald Parrish, and he is with us right now. Mr. Parrish, I appreciate you being here and dedicating time for this tonight as well. Let's start with the same question that we're going to ask all the candidates right off the top here, just kind of an introduction, so to make sure everyone knows you. Mr. Parrish, start with how long you have lived in the district, where roughly you live, what neighborhood you live in, and then thirdly, what you've done in the community to help solve a problem. If you can be as specific as possible, that would be great.
Okay, great. My name is Donald Parrish Jr. My father is Pastor Donald Parrish Sr. He actually ran for this seat back in 2007 and 2009. I have lived in the district for 9 months, but I have worked in the district for 22 years. My first job come out of college, out of the University of Texas, was working at Turner Court, and I've never left. I'm proud to say we have taken kids from at the time it was 2 middle schools. Now it's 1 middle school, both of the high schools, all 3 of the high schools in District 7. We've taken them on college tours now for 20 plus years, completely free for the students, for DISD students. So I'm very proud of that. I live right behind Skyline High School. And so we're near Jim Miller. And unfortunately, we hear the street racing and we hear the gunshots and et cetera, but we're running to try to make a difference. And a problem that I have tried to address, and I'm glad you asked the question, because it's one of my most proud achievements. Many of you have heard of the Breakfast with Dads event that happened at Dade Middle School. That was my organization, and I hate patting myself on the back. It's not my personality to do so, but I am the site-based decision-making president at Dade Middle School and have been now for about 8 years. And we put together an event, had over 600 men that actually showed up the day of the event. 1,000 men registered for that event, and of course that made national news. But we have been doing the work years before that forced me to organize my nonprofit, which is called The Steady Hand. And you can check us out. You can just Google us and check us out. But we are now actively mentoring all throughout Dallas. And so we're very proud of that achievement.
That did make a lot of news, Mr. Parrish, but you've worked in the district, 22 years you mentioned?
Yes, sir.
Living here for 9 months. What brought you over here after all these years? What brought you to the district itself as your resident?
I've always tried to move back into especially the South Dallas area. The housing stock is a issue, is a problem, which I hope we get a chance to talk to.
We'll do that in just a moment, definitely. But go ahead.
Yes, sir. And so we were in process of inheriting a family home, and we had to do some work on that home, and we found a home that was available. I was already thinking about running for city council, and it just turns out that we landed in District 7, which for me made a lot of sense because this is where the majority of my work in the city of Dallas has been. And so that's kind of what brought us here.
Well, let's talk about the seat itself. This is not an open seat. There's already a councilman there who's on the forum with us tonight. He'll be running as well on the ballot. But why should voters kick out the incumbent and elect you?
Well, I first would say it's good to see Adam. I've seen Adam more in these forums than what I've seen him in the 2 years that he's been in office. And I say that not even tongue in cheek. I was appointed as a TIF board president for Zone 13, a position that Adam had to vote on and approve. I attempted to meet with Adam directly as the TIF board chair so that we could have dialogue about what we can do to increase the amount of dollars we had to work with, which at the time was $50,000. And all 4 times I was promised a meeting and we never had a conversation about it. And so I've talked to Adam more in these forums than what we have in the business of the city, which is unfortunate. And I think that started me thinking about, I live here now. We've got to get better representation. And I just started seeing a pattern of behavior that I didn't think was conducive to the way we need to be led. A lack of civility, a lack of accountability, and a lack of responsiveness to all sides of District 7. And so that's what prompted me to get into the race.
In your opinion, Mr. Parrish, what are the 3 biggest challenges facing District 7 right now?
Okay, now, Jason, you're going to hear a theme. You're going to hear a theme all night. Everyone's number one answer is going to be crime. I mean, that's just the honest God truth. And not to repeat, for the sake of the viewers, everything that Kevin said, I will add, on top of being number one in murders, we saw an increase of over 400 more aggravated assaults and violent assaults just in District 7 alone last year. And before anyone says, well, that's the pandemic, et cetera, well, that was more than what happened in the previous year, which at the time was a nearly 20-year high. And so we are trending the wrong way when it comes to crime. The second one, believe it or not, is the boring work of being a council member. And that is code enforcement and making sure that the code enforcement is handled in a way that's fair to the community, but in a way where things get handled. For example, in walking in neighborhoods, what I have discovered is, and I talk to people about code complaints, and I ask them, hey, show me on 311 app where you have complained. And they say, well, let me show you what happens, Reverend Parrish. We complain, and then a week later, it gets closed. So it's almost as if the complaint has been addressed, but it has not been addressed. So we got a problem with the system some kind of way. I don't want to accuse anybody of anything nefarious, but I will say that we have an issue when it comes to follow through with our code compliance. And third is gentrification, especially in the Pleasant Grove, South Dallas area. We're getting homes built, for example, right across the street from Dunbar Elementary School. You had a home that recently sold for $298,000. The house right next, matter of fact, you can add up the houses, the next 3 houses to the left of that house, to the right of that house rather, and you won't get that figure when it talks about the worth of a home. And so you can imagine what that does to property tax. And Dallas is already on the high end of property taxes for a city our size. And so those are three of the issues. We have more, but I don't want to be too long-winded with my answer. So,
let's dive into those in crime, because crime has been rising over the last three city council members who have been in there representing District 7. What do you do? I've covered some of the larger criminal events that have happened down there, and we saw DPS in here a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and they couldn't get a handle on it either. So what in the world's a magic solution then?
Well, I believe DPS was here twice. They were here once, doing the typical monitoring, and they were stopping people, and right. I believe they did mostly warnings instead of ticketing. But the second time they were here to focus on homicides. And so, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. And so I think we have a partner with them if it's utilized correctly, not to have a neighborhood under siege or anything of that nature. But if they're here to help an already depleted police force, I think that's one thing that we can do. But it takes a lot.
Let me pause you just for a moment here. So would you support having DPS come in for longer periods of time?
I will support anything that will keep our neighborhood safe. Absolutely. And here's why I say this, because with the shortage of police officers, for example, I mentioned Dunbar Elementary School, and I hate to be the one on these forums that keeps bringing this stuff up, but I just think it's important, whether I win or lose, that people really know what's going on. Dunbar has gone on lockdown 4 times this year due to shootings that are happening in the area, not stuff that happens on campus, but something that's happening in the area that caused the kids to be threatened. Edna Rowe, right here in Buckner Terrace, went on lockdown 2 weeks ago. JJ Rhodes, 2 days later, same thing, shootings in the neighborhood. This is in broad daylight when the kids at recess, elementary kids. They don't deserve that. Nobody's child deserves to have to duck a gunshot when they want to go down the slide. That just doesn't make any sense to me. And so we cannot underfund and further deplete a police force. So if we can just get more patrol, especially in the area over by my church, if we just had patrol cars who would come, half of the drug selling that happens in broad daylight would disappear overnight, just with a simple pass-through. That cannot happen with a depleted police force. And so if we steady are pulling away at the police budget and we cannot schedule overtime, or even, how about this, hire the number of officers needed so we won't have to get into overtime, then I think things will get better. There are some other things we can do to prevent crime, and I definitely want to get into those as well.
Well, I'm sure you've looked at it, but are you familiar with the police budget and what share of the pie that is for the overall city budget?
Yes, I am.
Well, what do you, if you're, I think everyone is in agreement that we need those hundreds of officers who've left over the years, need them back to at least get back to where we were. What do you cut out of the budget to bring those people back, those hundreds of officers?
Here's the thing about it. I don't think we have to cut anything out. I think we have to get creative. Now we're in COVID right now, right? So we don't know exactly what the figures are going to be in COVID. So I don't want to go on the record saying something that could be an error, because we were fortunate last year when we got the CARES Act money, and we have the American Relief money that's coming as well this year. But when we get back to normal, I think there's some things we can do. Dallas, very quietly, is one of the highest grossing dollar-wise cities when it comes to conventions from corporations. So I think we can play with the tourism tax a little bit to help make up for the deficit that we have in other areas. So, for example, I believe one of the primary reasons why we have a shortfall of police officers is the pension, and that pension issue dates back to, I believe, 2017, where the state had to step in, due to some mismanagement, et cetera. And so I think if we want to attract the type of officer that we need, they also need to know that their retirement stuff will be taken care of. I mean, would you take a job with a police force, as dangerous as it is, that was only funded 40%? I wouldn't. And so we have to just use some common sense. But I think we can play with the tourism dollar without having to cut other things, and definitely without raising property tax in order to get to where we need to get to.
Well, let's talk property taxes for a moment, and gentrification, which you brought up as well, too.
Yes, sir.
There are a lot of people in District 7 who are obviously concerned about this, that they might be priced out of their homes because these houses are selling for, 4 or 5 times what they were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago.
Correct.
I'm having the same issue in my neighborhood in another district here in the city of Dallas. So what do you tell the constituents in District 7 who are rightly concerned that they might not be able to stay in their homes?
I will tell them this: they will have an advocate with me who will vote to never raise property tax. We simply cannot. And if we find ourselves facing, I mean, who knows what's going to happen post COVID, right? We never knew we'd be locked in our homes for a year, right? So I don't want to, again, I'll leave an out there. But what I will say is, I believe the city charter says that the council is able to raise taxes, property taxes, 3.5%. I believe this current council voted to give themselves more leeway. I was not in favor of that. I believe any type of property tax hike needs to go to the voter. And if the voter says, yes, we need to raise taxes because we understand what's going on, et cetera, then I'm all for it. But again, I don't believe simply raising property taxes is gonna solve this problem.
Let's talk transportation for a moment. Do you know how many DART stops there are in District 7?
I do not. I was happy to work with a committee that was formed to help DART fix some of the issues that we have with some of the stops, especially in the eastern and the southeastern part of the district. But I do not know how many bus stops we have.
Just to dive into that a tad more, Mr. Parrish, public transportation has always been an issue. I mean, once DART finally got the green line to District 7 to South Dallas, that's helped out a lot. But there are still problems that remain getting people into the city, getting people to work, and other parts of town. Obviously, there's a DART board, but city council, kind of has final say on what happens on city streets, et cetera. What do you think the solution is to get more ridership, to get more people moving around?
Well, first, I want to say right across the street from where our church is, and my father fought very hard with the DART board to help make this happen. We have a little kiss and ride, as they call it, and it's right across from the Parkland clinic at Hatcher Station, which I serve on the board for the clinic. And so we know how many of our patients depend upon that, so much so that we've even talked about, now that there's a dental clinic there, we've even talked about how do we help people cross from the train over to the clinic safer. And so we looked at bridges and all kind of things. And honestly, we built that clinic too small. We hit capacity within 3 months of that clinic opening. But getting back to DART, the DART station there on Martin Luther King is one of the highest used ones in the city. And so to that end, I believe people are getting that. Believe it or not, I think we need more stops. I really do. I know that sounds crazy, but I think we need more stops. And I think we need stops at more buses running at off-peak times, because people who work service industry type jobs, who are waiters, who are bus boys, hotel, et cetera, they need to depend on buses running more than, when they go down. And now again, we're through COVID. So right. They've been running on the COVID schedule, but even through normal times, during off-peak hours, we did not have enough. And then the last thing, a public safety issue, is making sure these bus stops are well lit and covered. Well lit and covered as much as we can. I know that's an expense, but I believe that's an expense that will pay itself back once we get more tax-paying people because they have jobs.
All right, Mr. Parrish, we are in our final 60 seconds of your segment here too. The floor is yours to talk for 1 minute and address voters directly.
Okay, thank you. District 7, I'm one of us. I love our city. I'm very partial to District 7. I'm very proud of the work. I challenge anyone who brings up how long I lived in the district to match the work that I've done in the district. Ask any of the principals from Skyline to Lincoln, Madison, Dunbar, Dade, if they have seen Reverend Parrish at their school and what has happened at their school through a steady hand, through Hope Restoration, which is our free nonprofit from the church, where we've done free summer camp for 15 years to help close the learning loss. Like we've been doing this. 250 kids from Dade Middle School to tour the University of Texas, all the fifth graders at Dunbar to tour SMU. This is all right before the pandemic. We were averaging about 5 college tours a year. Most of those kids came from District 7. They never had to pay a dime in over 20 years that we've done these college tours. If I can do this just with a pulpit and a microphone, imagine what we can do bringing the same common sense approach to a city council position. So our website is donaldparrishjr.com. Look us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. and I'm here to answer any question that you may have. I look forward to meeting you out, and I'm coming to a home very near you. So I look forward to seeing you.
All right, Mr. Parrish, thank you so much for the time tonight. We appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
And joining us now is Calvin Johnson. You can I see you unmuting yourself there. Good to see you again. Let's dive right into this, and let me just make a quick note of the time so I know when to wrap this up, because everything always goes over a minute or so here. I'll make sure I give you the fair amount of time. Mr. Johnson, you'll be third on the ballot for voters in District 7 coming up here in May. Let's start with the same question. Tell us how long you've lived in District 7, roughly where you live, what neighborhood, and what you have done already to address an issue there in the district.
Well, first of all, we live at Pine and 175 on Pine Street in Dallas, closer to the Queen City neighborhood. We've been living there for 3 years. And previous to that, I grew up in the district. I lived on the other end of Pine before. I grew up in the Bonton neighborhood of Turner Courts, and I grew up in Dixon Circle. And I became a lawyer out of both of those neighborhoods, which is very difficult to do. So my relentless attitude toward that has been something that I can hold my hat on. And what else did you ask me, Jason?
A specific example of an issue you've helped the district solve.
Well, what we're doing right now is Ringo Hope Boxing. We're mentoring kids. Before the pandemic, we were mentoring kids, and we're still mentoring kids now. And what we do is we bring kids from the community in. We teach them boxing, and we teach them life skills. And what we're trying to do is work from the bottom up. I mean, when you have young people, the best thing you can do is grab your young people and make sure that they get the help that they need and the assistance they need. And what we've also been doing at my church, which is the Lord Missionaries Baptist Church, I've been a member for my entire life. We've been feeding the community. And so we go out and we feed the community. We feed the homeless. Most of the time, honestly, I take money out of my own pocket to go feed the community. My grandmother was the last person to move out of the Turner Courts housing projects back in the day. She was a mother of the community, and I'm running in her honor, Mary Johnson. And she taught me to be a blessing to others. So when I'm blessed to be able to do what I do, I wanted to come back to the community and just give of myself as much as I could. And that brings me great joy.
You mentioned Turner Courts. You mentioned Dixon Circle as well too. I was in Dixon Circle 10 years ago now, probably when there was that police officer who shot and killed a man over there and turned into quite an issue. Let's talk about policing for a moment, Mr. Johnson. We're obviously watching what's happening in Minneapolis, and questions. We saw protests here on the streets of Dallas, and there are questions about whether the police department here needs to make any changes, or is this department, is it operated better? The men and women on the streets for the Dallas Police Department doing anything differently than other places? What do you think about the police department's the question here? I'm trying to nail it down exactly what it is, but are there problems at DPD that you think need to be addressed if you are elected?
Yes, there are problems at DPD that need to be addressed. I work with DPD right now. Leroy Quigg with the gang unit, we do a thing called barbershop talk. And we go out to local barbershop talks, and we sit in the barbershops, me, myself, the police officers, and we just talk to people. Instead of being there for a call out or being there for something negative, we have to create positive first contacts. That's the first thing we got to do. Back in the day as a kid, I grew up here in Dallas, they would hand out those Dallas football cards. And that would create an opportunity for the kids to get to know the officers and people to get to know the officers in the community. And we got to get back to that. We got to quit fighting each other, and we got to solve our crime problem. My brother cuts hair at a barbershop in South Dallas. A lady walked in last year. You might have heard about this on Grad, doing back to school, and shot the owner. And my brother was standing a few feet away. So crime is very important to me. We need to reduce our crime so that people feel safe living in our communities. And if you are not going to have a safe community, you can't get businesses and other things and other people to come live in this community if it's not safe. So we got to work with DPD. They have to improve, but we got to be part of the problem, part of the solution too. My candidacy's theme is it's on us. And that means the community itself has to work with the police. The police need to work with us. We got to work together to get this thing turned around.
But you mentioned reduction of crime. I mean, we've just watched it go up over the past 5 years in this city, and we've had multiple, council members in City Hall representing District 7. City Hall can't figure it out. It's not just District 7 either. What's the magic solution? What DPS was in here? Crime's still up. What do we do differently?
What we do differently is this. I can tell you, I'm different from every other candidate that's in here. I've been a criminal defense lawyer for the last 20 years, which means I know what kind of crimes people commit. I know why they commit them. I know the history that they have in committing those crimes. I work with the district attorney's office on a daily basis. I work with John Cuso, the current DA. I talk to police officers. So I work at all three levels, and I have an understanding of the crime problem and that the other ones just don't have. The first thing we got to do is create opportunities for young people, first of all, not to get arrested. When I say not to get arrested, mentor them. Bring them into the recreation centers, get them into the private mentoring programs, keep an eye on them, keep them busy. Then in addition to that, create opportunities where they can learn some job skills. That means they can get into something where they can be enthusiastic about it. They can learn some things so that they can work and make some decent money. The other thing we got to do is we got to work with our recreation centers to maybe start some athletic leagues. Get the kids involved in volleyball, baseball, basketball, some of those type of things. That way we can get them kids into something that will create opportunities for them not to commit crimes. We have to work together. The community has to start pulling some of our younger people and some of the people that have been involved in crimes, and we got to start working with those folks so that they don't continue to commit crimes. That's the difference between me. I already have a relationship with the DA's office. I know what kind of programs they have. I serve in multiple mentoring programs at the courthouse. Judge Amber Givens has a mentoring program. Every year, I mentor a couple of young men, and I make sure that they understand what they need to do moving forward.
You mentioned recreation centers as well, too, keeping kids off the streets. When I got to know District 7 a little more here, I looked up how many there were. Do you know how many rec centers there are in District 7?
I think there are at least about 5 or 6 is what I'm thinking.
4 is how many that I've identified, but someone might challenge me on that. But the 4 are the ones that I know. Let's switch gears and talk about something else just for a moment here too. And the city of Dallas or District 7, Far East Dallas itself, has been behind when it comes to recreation services for a half century now too. So here's a question. It's kind of a long one, but I want you to listen to it here too. After 2 decades of advocacy by the Ferguson Road Initiative, residents who live near the Ash Creek Greenbelt are finally seeing the fruits of this advocacy with the new White Rock Hills Park, construction of the Highland Road Complete Street, and the starting construction of the Trinity Forest Spine Trail, and funding for the Ash Creek Trail as well. This is something I'm sure you're probably familiar with, but it's long overdue. So getting down to the question here, for 22 years, the city has promised these areas to build a recreation center. How do you ensure that those promises are finally kept? Because this has been going on since the 1990s and long before that. What would you do to make sure that people there can enjoy a recreation center finally?
We got to hold their feet to the fire. We have to be relentless. See, what happens is people get elected and they forgot why they're there. That community needs that recreation center. That recreation center is not just going to be a recreation center for them. It's going to be a hub to provide senior services. It's going to be a hub to keep kids out of trouble. It's going to be a hub to get information out to the communities. You have to convince the council that that's not just a recreation center. It's a nerve center for the community. And if you convince them that it's going to decrease spending, decrease crime, and provide a hub for information to get out to the community as a whole, then you start looking at that center a little differently. And that's what we have to do. We have to think outside of the box. I've been a lawyer for 20 years. I think outside of the box. I almost think of everything. In law school, they teach us to do that. And in growing up in this community, I had to also think on my feet, because growing up in those rough neighborhoods, I had to understand how to keep myself out of the wrong type of situation. So I'm going to use my experience in thinking outside of the box to convince the other members on this council and get 8 votes to make sure that happens.
Mr. Johnson, you know this is not an open seat. Why should the voters kick out the incumbent and elect you?
I'll tell you this, the last 2 incumbents, one actually got arrested and the other one actually cut police overtime. I'm just being straight up honest with y'all. We're tired of it. As a lawyer, as a 20-year business owner in District 7, and as somebody who I've worked all my life, and I knew one day that I would run for city council in Dallas. It sounds crazy, but I went to the high school for public services, government, and law. I went and got a political science degree in college. I got a law degree. I came out and I opened my first business in District 7, straight out of law school. I had $1,500. In November marks my 20th year in business. So that's the difference between me and the other people. I'm a District 7 success story. I'm the son of the community. I am what this community has to offer, coming from the lowest and now reaching the highest. That's what I want to do for this community. And I'll tell you one thing, I'm passionate about this community. I love it. And I'm going to be relentless. I'm going to be as relentless as a council member as I was of chasing my dream as a lawyer. And it took a long time to get here, but I got here. And I'm going to make sure that I get here for the people of my district.
Mr. Johnson, you mentioned public safety, but what name two other primary challenges, paramount challenges you think that D7 faces?
Gentrification is a major one. I go talk to people all the time, and they're afraid that these $250,000, $350,000 homes are going to drive their property taxes up so high that they can't afford their houses. So we need to create some kind of tax break for those folks. When a big $250,000, $300,000 houses get built next to them, we need to put something in our tax code that allows them a break. The other thing is trash, illegal dumping, and code. I'll give you an example. This past week, one of my former clients was coming from Joplin over to South Dallas. She hit a puddle during that rainstorm that we had. Her car turned over. The car almost went off the bridge. You know why she hit a puddle? Because there was a mattress, a dirty mattress that somebody dumped that was covering the storm drainage. That's the kind of stuff that we got to work on. It's when people think of illegal dumping, you think that it's something small. No, it almost cost somebody that I knew their lives this past week. We got to work on that because our part of the city has to be cleaner and more respectable. So when we talk about the other two things, gentrification, which we are all worried about, we got to protect our legacy landowners, homeowners, and business owners, and then the illegal dumping and trash and code. We got to get code up. I went to a lady over in Dixon Circle on the Grovewood community neighborhood. I went down to her house. There was a house next door, and they had dogs. The fence wasn't high enough. He had 5 or 6 cars in the front yard, and code enforcement was doing nothing. And those cars looked like they had been there forever. You can't have a strong, positive, clean, decent community when you approach code enforcement and you approach the illegal stuff in the communities like that. You can't do that.
Well, is it hiring more people, code enforcement officers to work over there? Is it decapitating the administration who's in charge of code enforcement? Because you probably know it's not just District 7 where 311 calls get mysteriously closed. It's all over the place where these things happen. So what do you do to fix it? Because it's been going on for years.
What you do is you hire more people, number one. Number two, and you get those code enforcement officers, not just to hand out tickets, get them to work with the people in the community. Let that code enforcement go up to that person and say, hey, look, I'll give you 7 days to fix this. If not, and come back, I'm going to ticket you. And then come back and ticket that person. Work with the community. Don't just go into their yards and go into their businesses and say, hey, this is our code. I'm going to write you a bunch of tickets for it. Let's work with the community. I was talking to a young lady and some things were not in code on her property. And she said, if somebody would have just came to talk to me, I would have fixed that. So let's work with the communities. Let's not make code enforcement just enforcement. Let's get things up to code, but let's work with the community because see, if you are handing out a bunch of tickets, people aren't going to be in favor of that. But if you get code to do their job and work with the community, people will be in favor of that. And I think I can get that done for us.
You mentioned gentrification also and how the tax bills are likely going to go up. And you're exactly right about that. But the issue, as you well know, is the city tax is a small portion of the property tax that we all pay. The biggest portion, obviously, is the school district. And then there's a county tax, Parkland tax, stuff like that. How do you, even if the city reduces their tax, you're still going to have, a massive chunk that people are still going to have to write a bigger check for with the school taxes.
Look, we have a lot of conventions and a lot of things that come to the city. So what you do is, and let's be honest, some of the people visiting Dallas, sometimes you're going to have to tax them. And unfortunately, that's just part of it. We have a lot of conventions. We have a large convention center. We have large hotels. We have a lot of people that come from out of town, in town. So I've seen San Antonio do this. We can do this. We can just add some more tax to the people that are holding their events here. We have to do that. They're not going to move their events. A lot of these events are annual. They're not going to go anywhere. So we need to bump that up a little bit and try to use some of that money to deal with some of our tax issues.
We have about 90 seconds left. Let me ask you this to burn up a few seconds here. I'm just curious. You've been here for a long time. You have roots there in the district. What do you do on a Friday night, Saturday night? Where do you go?
Well, it's hard for me right now. I have a 3-year-old daughter, so I spend most of my time with her. And right now under the pandemic, you can't really go anywhere because I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I get out there and get COVID. I just attended a funeral yesterday. My assistant's little brother, Renee Mata, passed away. And it hurts my heart because he was a special needs young man and he died of COVID. So right now, me and my daughter, I'm trying to keep her safe. My lovely daughter, Tatiana Faith, I want to make sure that she's safe. So me and my wife, we pretty much stay home and try to work with the kiddos. So that's about it.
Understand. I have little ones here in my house as well too. You have 60 seconds to address voters directly. The floor is yours.
Look, District 7, I've been trying to get to this point all of my life. I came from one of the roughest neighborhoods in the community. I have beat all the odds to make it in life. A lot of people that have supported me that I'm running, they're actually supporting me because they're saying, Calvin, wow, you made it. We're so proud of you. You're the example of the great things that can come from District 7. I actually have a video that I'm going to release next Saturday called District 7, Calvin D. Johnson, Son of the Community. And it's going to pinnacle my start from the beginning in Bonton and Dixon Circle, and then all the way to having my own law firm and all the way to attending an NBA draft for Chris Bosh. I was one of his lawyers. So I have lived a great life because of District 7. And the most important thing to me is to be relentless and never to let them down. And when you look at it, I want you to think about this. I started a long time ago in District 7. I owe everything to District 7. Even my business. When I started, like I said before, I had $1,500, and in November marks my 20th year. And I want to continue to work in this community. I'm going to be relentless, and I'm going to get it done. And I'm going to use my legal experience and knowledge of the laws to make sure that that happens.
All right, Mr. Johnson, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate that.
One last thing, Jason, CalvinDJohnson.com is my website. Go there, and I'll even come to your house. If you have questions, I'll come and answer your questions personally. I'm that committed. Thank you.
All right, good deal. Thank you so much. Up with us next, number 4 on the ballot is going to be Tremonica Brown, and she is joining us now. Tremonica, you're still on mute. Want to make sure you get off mute there so we can absolutely get going here. Thanks for joining us this evening. Let's start with the same question we ask all of the candidates, and that is how long you have lived in District 7, what neighborhood you are in, and what specifically you've already done to help the community solve a problem.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I have moved back to the district. I've been here about 9 or 10 months now. I have lived collectively in the district for 20 plus years. I left in return when I saw it was a need for me to come back to my community. And what was the next question?
What specifically you've done to help the community solve an issue, solve a problem?
Awesome. So especially for the Southern sector, I developed my organization called Not My Son. And we seen a need, for cleanliness. Code enforcement wasn't, exactly doing their job. And so we started doing it ourselves. We host a community cleanup. We've started to provide resources as far as livable placement for homeless. We feed the houseless and the homeless. It's a difference between the two. We do that monthly. Here recently, when the Texas storm happened, we provided over 600 families with shelter. So, we're doing work. We're doing the best we can.
Well, let's start with code enforcement, since you mentioned that. What's going on with code enforcement? Is code enforcement not doing its job, or are they just overwhelmed with the number of requests down there?
I do feel like, because from my understanding, code enforcement, they share districts. So it's like 1 or 2 people that circle over 2 districts, which is very large. District 7 is large as is. Yeah. We don't have the needed support as to actually carry on the burden of what District 7 the needs are, because we do have a lot of trash, and even with trying to connect to get people to come and pick up the trash that we, pick up ourselves, that's become an issue as well. So we definitely need more people on the ground with code enforcement.
So is it hiring more people like you're talking about here, or is it firing who's at the top of the organization, who's in charge?
I feel like to be honest, I'm not going to say which one is necessary, because until I actually get into the space to see what the problem is, I don't want to overstep without knowing all the full knowledge. I do know that there is a lack of communication between what needs to happen versus what is happening.
And you mentioned you just moved back into the district after kind of being around, moving out and coming back in. Have you been back long enough to get a feel for the problems and make a legitimate run for this seat?
Absolutely. So, I really never left. I moved, but I'm in my neighborhood all the time. My family still lives there. So we host a lot of our family get-togethers within the city bounds, within District 7. So I never really left per se. I would always visit. But when the time came for me to have to really start to serve my community personally, I'd answer the call and I moved back.
Well, let's talk about that. What specifically did people urge you to run on? What are the 3 biggest issues, in your opinion, facing District 7?
Well, the reason that I actually moved back was because of the George Floyd. When we had that happen, it was a problem. We have public safety, and I don't feel like anybody was really trying to tackle the real issue of public safety, and everybody just wanted to kind of wrap around public safety versus breaking that down. So I stepped in it knee deep. I started engaging beats. I went past going DPD because that's a large operation. We needed to debunk what's going on individual with beats and actually talking to some of those police officers who serve that community. Of course, the community cleanups, just the drive from where I was to where I, am now, it was too extensive. So we just decided to just come home. I'm born and raised here. I'm a Skyline alumni, and it was the best thing to do. So public safety, affordable housing, I feel like that everybody should have an opportunity to live somewhere within the means of their income. And also economic opportunity. We don't have a lot of economic opportunity, and that falls back on public safety. We won't be able to get that until we actually have safer community.
Economic, and because I want to ask you about these two, and you mentioned, tell me one more time the second one. Public safety, economic opportunity, and there was one in between.
And affordable housing.
Affordable housing, because I want to ask you about that too. But let's talk about the George Floyd incident for a moment, because one of the biggest things that came out of this for municipal governments all across the country was defunding police. Do you think that the Dallas Police Department should be defunded by one penny, by any amount?
I definitely feel like we needed to reallocate some funds. I feel like the fact that the funds were reallocated very, the word for it, lackluster, for lack of a better term, is the reason why it's so hard to say where we need to reallocate funds now, because those funds were misappropriated from the get-go and it didn't go to the proper resources.
So, and we've discussed this earlier, the viewers have been watching the whole time, know it, and you probably know it as well too. The city of Dallas is already down hundreds of police officers. At one point, I think it was 900 officers, and maybe less than that now. But what would you take away from the police department? Because there are already fewer, feet on the street.
Well, so here's the thing. I don't feel like we need a ton of police officers in order to create safer communities. I feel like what we need to focus on is giving the opportunity for the police officers to do their job, which is to protect and serve. We need to reallocate some of those funds to go towards mental health. We have a large population of mental health, and a lot of those police calls are coming from mental health. We also have drugs in our community. So drug rehabilitation is going to be something. If we have different offices that cater to answering those calls, that's going to alleviate a lot of that pressure that we have on DPD, and also be able to service our community better and eliminate a lot of these calls that are causing friction in between our communities.
The second one you mentioned is affordable housing. I'll do a shameless plug for my podcast that we just released today, Y'all-itics. But the whole topic was about this insane real estate market right now in Dallas. One of your fellow candidates just mentioned a $298,000 house right next to one of the elementary schools as well too. On my podcast today, one of the brokers for Keller Williams said that housing is becoming a luxury item, which is phenomenal. Affordable housing has always been an issue in the city of Dallas. How do you bring it back?
Awesome. I'm so glad you asked that question. So I want to present an opportunity that is going to both take care of two things. The first thing would be a lot of our crime comes from apartments. In order to also bring more opportunity to home ownership, it's a program where I want to steamroll out as soon as I get in office, where it's whether I'm in office or not. Let me be clear, because this is something that needs to happen for the community. It's an opportunity where we can afford a 40 properties, and it'll have duplexes, 2-bedroom, 1-bath, and that's just the starting model. And they'll be $70,000 a year. That'll be geared towards a lot of those people who don't have home ownership. A lot of low-income housing people who are on Social Security, for our elderly people. We want to give them an opportunity to own. And that way we're also moving away from that poverty of we're staying and we're not doing anything, and we're not able to have anything tangible to call our own. Because I feel like when you have something that belongs to you, you put more effort into it. So I want to bring that into the fold of District 7. And 70,000 is a whole lot better than the magical number that I was told, which is $225,000 to be exact. And that's just not affordable for all of District 7, especially the southern sector.
Yeah, the $70,000 house is certainly, very appealing, but maybe I missed it in there. How do you pay for these things?
So it's a couple of different options to getting it paid for. It's a lot of sponsors that would come into it. They're drafting up a budget plan right now. I don't want to misquote it as far as to how much they would be asking the city for.
So is it the city? Is it public-private? Is that what it is? Is that what it would be?
Yes.
One of the other issues that kind of leads into all this as well too is the pandemic, and so many people have either lost their jobs outright or they have lost hours on their jobs as well at work. How do you making sure you're still with us there? We lost your picture.
You lost my picture. Uh-oh.
Yes, ma'am. There you are. All right.
Okay.
So the question is, along the economic opportunity lines there, how do you bring more jobs to District 7? Because there are people who live there are watching property taxes go up, watching people move in, gentrification happen. How do you bring the jobs in there so everyone can get a share of the pie?
Well, so number one, we have to break that public safety. It's hard to attract businesses when we're number one, to be exact, for crime. So we need to debunk what that is going to look like and how to really get into the meat and potatoes of that. So that way we can appeal to even have people want to come in and provide economic opportunity.
Let's move to a different kind of similar issue here too. If people are priced out of their homes, then homelessness is certainly an issue. There are a lot of factors of homelessness, obviously, but it's been increasing in citywide and in District 7. No one has been able to figure this one out anywhere in the state, especially from Dallas City Hall. How do you propose, Ms. Brown, that the city face this crisis and handle this crisis?
I feel like, what I will say that I don't feel will work are those containers. That's $109 and 300 square feet. I don't feel like that is the proper option.
$109,000, yeah.
No, not 109. It's 106. No, what is it? I'm sorry. It's 300 square feet and it's $906 to rent.
Yeah, to rent. Correct.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Yes, I don't think that those will work. What I feel like is that we need to bring in more social work. We need to pour in more dollars to our homelessness solution so that way we can actually get some programs running and funded that can actually help pick up. That's 1% of the budget. That's not enough. That's not adequate in order to take up how much space that we have. And we're currently constantly moving, which I'm in very much so disagreement with, that we're constantly moving all of these efforts to try to house these people. I have cleaned up in the same sector where those people they used to live there. And now they no longer live there. They have their apartment per se is now outside. So it's not like these people have been homeless their entire lives. COVID has hit them and they need help and they're willing to work, but they can't afford anywhere because you have to make 3 times the rent, sometimes 4 in some cases. And then in most of these cases, especially in South Dallas, we have it to where we have a lot of slumlords to where people don't even have running water or livable water right now. So those are some of the issues that we need to face. And we definitely need to pour more into homelessness. That budget needs to increase. It's 1% of the budget, and that is not enough to get the problem that we have done.
Everyone who's eyeballed the budget or even their own household budget knows there's only a single pot of money, and you got to figure out how to put it in as many places as you can. So what would you cut out of the budget to pour more money into homelessness?
I feel like that we should take some money from DPD.
And what jobs would you get rid of at DPD, or how would you take money from overtime, from new patrol cars? What do you think?
Well, so here's the thing. If we took the $7 million, they didn't do right with the $7 million. I just want to stand firm on that. I absolutely agree with constituents who say, well, look what they did with the money. They did a horrible job with it. I do agree. What I will say is, had we would have taken that money and invested it into, I don't know, some type of homelessness programs, we would have been more accessible to do more things and to show that, yes, we're now taking the load off of a lot of the crime are coming from people who don't have anything. When you don't have anything and your back is against the wall, you're going to attack because your thing is to now try to gain something that you don't have. That puts Dallas especially in a very high crime, right, as is. And then especially in the southern sector, because that's where a lot of those people get dumped. That's where a lot of those people are left, and that's where they
Right.
are currently.
And of course, with every conversation, the time runs out on us. We are already at 15 minutes. I promised you 60 seconds to address voters directly. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. I just want to let everybody know that we need to have a candidate that is going to be for the people, that is going to put the people first above all else, and that is going to care about the needs and answer the calls when needed. Again, when just with the winter storm, when I was called upon, I definitely answered the call immediately without the city's help. The city told me to call 211, and instead I relied on the people to pull us up and to make sure that the people take care of the people. So thank you guys so much for having me. I'm Tremonica Brown. I'm number 4 on the ballot, number 1 in the community, and I hope to earn your vote.
Ms. Brown, thank you so much. We appreciate the time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Next up with us now is Changa Higgins, Walter Changa Higgins, and we're going to get him into the room here in just a moment. And if you could, there you go. You're on top of it. Thanks for being patient here. Number 5 on the ballot, coming up on May 1st. Let's start again with the same question. Sir, tell us how long you've lived in District 7, roughly where you live, what neighborhood you live in, and finally, what specific issue you've helped the community address.
Well, thank you, Jason, and thank you for Buckner Terrace and the Far East Dallas group for having the forum. I stay in Far East Dallas, right off Sharpview Lane, Sharpview and Woodhue, not too far from Buckner Terrace, actually. The neighborhood across the highway, across 30. Some of my biggest accomplishments, I think that I'm proudest of in the city is being one of a coalition of about 30 groups and organizations from all over the city that was able to come together and end a 30-year journey with the city and fighting for the realization of the Office of Police Oversight and the Community Police Oversight Board. And that's something that I'm very proud of because I was able to stand on the shoulders of a lot of elders in District 7, like Diane Ragsdale, Marvin Crenshaw, Roy Williams, and others who have been pushing for that office to be strengthened for years. Also, I was able to lead a 2-year community engagement process that was based in South Dallas, Fair Park, called Unify South Dallas. And a part of that was pushing the South Dallas Action Plan, which never became a reality. But it has some really good principles and some really good innovative things in there that I think now are coming back to the table, even though that was 10 years ago, it was probably ahead of its time. But it did start and spark a lot of conversations about how highways can destroy communities, heavy industry destroys communities, and about zoning and about changing our ideas about how communities are built. So those 2 things I'm really proud of. Was that all the question?
That was it. Let me ask you something else. And why'd you decide to get in this race?
I decided to get in this race because I'm tired. I became tired after working in the community for almost 20 years since I've been in Dallas and working across the district. I live in Far East, but I've always worked in several different areas across the district. I realized that it's not just about who is in the office, who is getting the job as the council person at the time. Our leadership is disconnected from the people in the way that we not only choose our leaders, but also the way in which our leaders have become status quo and the way they govern is disconnected from the people. As Marvin Crenshaw, who's one of my elders and one of the folks who pushed for 14-1 to become a reality in the city, always says, it was never meant to be that way. 14-1 was created so that communities could actually be more of a stakeholder in the leadership process in the city. And so I am running to bring innovation, to bring a new style, which really is an old style, but bringing a new style that is focused on co-governance. It's about making the community a partner in the decision-making process and driving the direction of the district.
Well, let's dive into that for a moment. You say the leaders are disconnected. Anybody who's been in public office will tell you that it's a 24-hour-a-day job, 7 days a week. How will you be more connected than any of your potential predecessors?
So, well, recent predecessors, because let me mention the history. When we talk about the history of District 7, we're talking about the district that has produced some of the greatest and iconic figures when it comes to pushing the city of Dallas into new policies, into new forms of government and innovations, and moving the city and progressing the city on racial and inequity situations. So what I'm saying is I'm taking it back to the old school. I'm trying to change the game by taking it back to the old school, by bringing in a style that actually is collaborative, that will do things like Elsie Faye Higgins used to do, who was a great councilwoman and very effective councilwoman, who would have a community council and would go over the city council agenda and create policy in real time with the citizens, right? Making neighborhoods, business leaders, church leaders, folks who are working on the front lines and organizations and activists actually a part of the decision-making process of the district. Right now, it's a top-down style. It's a one-way conversation where we have bosses of our districts and we have bosses of District 7. And whatever way they feel like it should go, that's how it goes. I'm talking about being a bridge, a facilitator, a unifier.
Well, as far as
problems together.
Sorry about that. As far as those policies go, in your opinion, in almost 20 years there in the district, what are the three biggest issues facing District 7 right now?
Well, definitely public safety and a smart, balanced approach to public safety, relief for working families, and that's across the district. A lot of times when we think of need, we think of South Dallas Fair Park, which has some of the greatest needs because of its historical, position that it's had in the city. But across the district, we have working families that are struggling during the pandemic, as well as, with the winter storm exacerbating every aspect of life holistically in the community, from crime to education to economic development, economic opportunities for working families and people trying to find jobs, as well as, and I guess my last one would be specifically about South Dallas Fair Park would be gentrification. And when I speak on gentrification really quickly, I'm not just talking about, I'm talking about the way the zoning is set up in South Dallas Fair Park. I'm talking about the problems that our elders and our legacy homeowners are having to be able to keep their homes, and their children and their families be able to keep their homes, and to be able to update those homes and keep them up to code. I think those are my biggest issues for me, three biggest issues.
You mentioned South Dallas Fair Park, and that's gotten a lot of the conversation tonight too, but District 7 is much bigger than that as well. I wanted to ask you the same question I asked one of your other candidates on here too, and that is the lack of recreational services in Far East Dallas. And it's been that way for years. And, folks up in some of those neighborhoods up there have been waiting since the 90s for a recreation center up there. How do you go into City Hall and make sure this finally becomes a reality for families who've frankly probably aged out of this already?
Well, it's just going to take some real courage. It's going to take some imagination, and it's going to take some innovation and creativity and looking at the budget and find out how we can make some of that reality. But it's also going to take changing the conversation about communities in District 7. Our community and the conversation that's happening around the city about District 7, right? A lot of the conversation that we hear is based in being a problem community, whether we're talking about crime, lack of economic development, and different things like that. And it doesn't focus on the social fabric and the human factor of who our community is in the different neighborhoods and communities across the district. And so that's what happens when you put profit over people. And so we got to reorient and recenter the conversation around these things and show why rec centers are important and how important they are to the social fabric of the community.
And obviously part of public safety is making sure kids have something to do in the afternoon. Do you know how many swimming pools are in District 7?
I would say public or?
Public, yes, sir.
Probably about 4.
You've been there a couple of years longer than me, but my research has shown 2.
Okay. Maybe
Xline,
thinking of a couple of private ones too.
Xline and Everglade are the two
Mhm.
there. Let's talk about. Let me turn the. I had the doors open here at the house forever. Now it's kind of hot in here. But let's talk about food deserts, because no one's been able to solve this. The city can't solve this. Cannot convince people to really, make an investment, not just one, but 1, 2, 3, or 4, and give people a place to get fresh food. Can you do anything differently?
So I think that we got to focus on people power, right? Like a lot of our problems, we continue to try to solve these problems the same way we've always solved them. Every 2 years, we hear a group of candidates come together and they talk about solving these problems, and we have the same conversation every time, right? We can't keep doing that. We got to figure out some bold, innovative things. We got to look outside of Dallas and look outside of Texas as well, and find programs that work in cities of comparable size and communities like ours. And there are too many models for us to be still stuck in this problem. I will say this is that because of the way the culture of City Hall pushes innovation out, community innovation out, and we have to start to bring it in. And one of the ways we do that is there's people all across our district that are solving food desert problems right now without any city money, without any help from the city, and they're doing it on their own. We're talking about ground up grassroots initiatives. We can take those initiatives and we can figure out a way to get them money, to empower them, and to create a system with them that we can integrate them into the city's infrastructure. And we don't have to solve all the problems ourselves. But that's a culture change. That's a reorientation of the city's culture of how we deal with solving problems in our community.
Mr. Higgins, if you're elected day one, of all the things you just mentioned, what's your priority?
Day one, I'm hiring a policy and community engagement director. I don't know where that money is going to come from right now, but it may come from private. It may be cobbling the money together amongst nonprofits and people who believe in this idea. But that person's job will be to go throughout the community, because I can't do it all myself. Go throughout the community and find the neighborhood leaders, the community leaders, the organizers, the activists from the nonprofits, the religious leaders, the business leaders. And we're going to create a council along with the board appointees and commission appointees. We're going to stop working in silos. We're going to bring everybody together, and we're going to sit down, and we're going to, first of all, ourselves together, prioritize what are the real problems across our districts. I'm talking about people from Buckner Terrace sitting down talking with people from Joppy about what are the central themes in our communities and how are we going to solve these problems together, right? We got to create that sense of community and connectivity back. And the way you do that is you give everybody ownership and you sit everybody down at the table that matters, and you let them solve the problems, because the community already knows what the problems are and how to solve them. They just need a leader that's a facilitator and a bridge to give them the resources to be able to do it and the space to do it.
Is that biting off more than you can chew, though?
No, because it's people power, right? I don't have to be everything to everybody. That goes back to this idea of the way leadership is done right now. Everybody that I've walked in Buckner Terrace, Claremont, South Dallas Fair Park, across this district, other parts of Far East, and people complain that they don't see the current incumbent enough. Well, the problem is that he shouldn't be in all those places at one time either. Where's his core? Where's his army of community activists and people who work on these issues for free already that would be willing to be his representatives in those communities? You got to change the way you're thinking about our leadership. It's time to do something different.
And it is already out of time for our conversation here. But as always, with everybody else, you get 60 seconds to address voters directly here in District 7. The floor is yours, sir.
All right, District 7, Buckner Terrace. Let me just say my motto of my campaign is community matters. Your community matters to me. I've been working on the serious issues in the community for almost 2 decades now. I've dedicated my life to solving the problems on those issues. And I'm saying that time is up for trying to solve these problems the same old way. We need courage, we need innovation, we need a fighter, we need someone who can come in and disrupt when they need to and change the conversation that's going on at City Hall. I'm the guy who can do that. I'm a unifier. I've worked with everybody across the district. I'll continue to do that. And I'm not talking about what I will do. I'm talking about what I've been doing already. And I hope to get your vote and be your next councilman on May 1st.
All right, that's Mr. Chonga Higgins, Walter Chonga Higgins. You are number 5 on the ballot. Is that right? Number 5?
I'm on the ballot.
Number 5. All right. We appreciate your time, sir. Thank you very much.
Oh, and my website is chongafordallas.com. If anybody wants to reach me, or you can find me on Facebook, Chonga Higgins for District 7.
Good deal. Thank you so much. Next up, number 6 on the ballot is JT Turtman. He is on the line here with us as well. Mr. Turtman, good to see you.
Great to see you again, Jason.
Let's dive into the basics for people who might not know who you are. Tell us how long you have lived in District 7, where you live in District 7, roughly the neighborhood, and then finally what you've done to help solve a specific problem in the district.
Yes, I live in District 7. I've lived there over 30 years. I now currently stay in East Dallas off of St. Francis, across from Buckner Terrace, across the bridge, directly in that area. And I've worked on quite a few programs. I'm a U.S. Army veteran, and I served as a drill sergeant, platoon sergeant. And what I feel like I bring to the table that's needed in District 7 is leadership. I've been trained in leadership. I'm also an ordained pastor for over 30 years, and I've had a lot of community programs that I've put together. I've had the pleasure to work as chair of the Week and See with the Dallas Police Department, Shirley Gray, Southeast Chief, and Ben Click on several occasions, and we weeded out crime, brought in opportunities. And we saw a lot of crime in Pleasant Grove area pulled down in those days. What have I done? Okay, as chair of TCBN, that's True Council Business Economic Network, we trained over 2,000 people in District 7 on starting their own business. We bought in information so they could have and they could be successful business people. We started a workforce solution to train hundreds of people. And I've been doing this already. At the moment, as I'm running now, we just started a program in South Dallas where we are now trying to hire 100 people and get homeless people off the streets. I have a program called Yes that will work with the homeless people. And what Yes is, it is youth 35 and under. We have a lot of homeless youth. E, economic development. S is for senior safety security. We want to make sure that our youth are empowered. They are a part of the community and they're not a part of the problem. We want to work with our Dallas Police Force. I've talked to associations about coming in back into the schools and going into study halls.
Well, we spend a lot of time talking specifically about South Dallas. I want to ask about the other neighborhoods too, Buckner Terrace, Pleasant Grove, other places like that in the district. Considering those neighborhoods, what do you think the biggest issues are facing them?
They all have some of the same issues. We have a public safety problem, and we must reduce the crime. And so this is the reason why my Yes program, we are first of all building a relationship between the Dallas Police with our youth, go into schools, study halls, alternative breaks after school, beginning to get familiar with our youth and our youth with the police officers. Also from this, because we have 800 police, we need 800 policemen. We want to recruit from our youth and from our neighborhoods and bring in new police officers. It's a fine opportunity. Possibly we could bring in an academy to the area at one of our schools. So what we need to do is we need to bring down the crime, clean up our neighborhoods so we can bring in more residents, and that's rooftops, and then bring in new businesses, and that's taxes.
Well, obviously that's easier said than done. What do you think the solution is? You have a military background. How in the world do you clean up crime that's been persistent and is going up?
We could definitely do it. That's why you have to have so much training leadership. First of all, you got to get down to the root of the crime, Jason. A lot of the crime is dealing with economics. We have to bring in economic opportunities. 2017, we brokered a deal over in Joppy with a couple of companies to put their batch plant there. Right. And in return, I told them they would come back and they would give something to our community in District 7. So they went to the Texas municipal governments and offered, brokered a deal to bring over 50 companies down 310 and I-45. These were going to bring jobs. One of the companies was Gap. Well, this was going to be great. The batch plant had no more fumes than a Burger King. But then in 2017, the current city council got petitions and kind of batted it down. I'm not sure why a city council would want opportunities to come to the district. But from my understanding, it was something to do with money. Also, I went in there, Joppy, and made sure that the money that had been stolen had stopped. and it was getting into the hands of a nonprofit 501c3 that was certified.
District 7 obviously is huge from Joppy to, Far East Dallas, Buckner Terrace, out to Pleasant Grove as well. On day one, what's priority? What do you tell your staff that we're going to focus on first?
We're going to focus on reducing crime and come in immediately, reducing crime and dealing with our police force and talking to our police associations, because we have a new chief, and I believe right now we are primed to do something great, but we have to come in reducing crime immediately. If we don't do that, we have a problem in Buckner Terrace. Buckner Terrace is a great place to live, but we have homeless problems and we have crime problems. We can reduce some of that. We also have a program that's part of our YES program. It's called New Beginnings, where we're helping veterans get placed in homes and homeless people. So these are type of programs we want to bring to District 7. We want to clean out as much homelessness as we can. And I believe we could do that as a team. It's going to take an effort, and it's going to take everybody, but we're starting right now.
Some of the other candidates for District 7 have said they want to defund some of the police. Where do you stand on that?
I would not defund the police. We had in 2020, we had the worst year of a pandemic in all of Texas. We had 251 homicides, and that was higher than any city in Texas. And defunding the police was not a good idea. And our city council led the drive. Being popular is not important. Being community is important right now. We need a leader who understands the people and the vibe of our community. And Buckner Terrace is a thriving community with great people, but we need leadership to take to the next level, because you hear a lot of gunshots, you hear a lot of alarms, sirens. It's a lot of negative things going on. Cars have been stolen. Why they get out the car, that kind of stuff shouldn't be in a nice neighborhood.
But Buckner Terrace has low crime rates, as you probably know as well, too. Just what I think 1% of homes are affected by crime there specifically. Is this a one-size-fits-all approach?
Well, actually, there are more crimes than you may recognize that happen in the area of Buckner Terrace, East Dallas, that may not be properly reported. Because I'm out there and I'm on the streets, not just here when I'm running for office, but I'm out there and I'm finding out, I'm talking to the homeless people, and I'm hearing the things that are going on. So sometimes it's not reported correctly. We found that out with the FBI years ago, that the reports were not really showing the numbers appropriately in crime.
Obviously, there are systemic problems across the city, but especially in District 7.
Yes,
you mentioned a number of them, but homelessness is something that you've kind of said that you've worked on as well, too.
Mm-hmm.
City Hall can't figure this out. And Dallas isn't alone by any means in this. Austin's having huge trouble. So is Houston as well. What are these cities doing wrong? Why can't they address this?
Well, first of all, I think you got to have passion and empathy for our homeless people. And I understand, because I went through a time of being homeless, and I learned myself how to navigate. They need a lot of them need skills. They need to be retrained. Some are all right and ready to go back into a place. Everybody's not ready to go into a house. Some people need an apartment. Some people need a room. But I believe we have an opportunity to get everyone off the streets if we can define and we can relate and we can communicate to them and present them a plan that they can work with. And people will work with you if you got a plan to work with them.
Let's talk education for a moment here too. Education is obviously a huge factor in
Yes.
reducing crime.
Mhm.
Do you know, Mr. Turtnick, do you know the trustees that represent District 7 or parts of it at least?
Mr. Henry? Justin
Mr.
Henry, yeah.
Mr. Henry's one of them. There are others as well too. Just didn't know how familiar you were with that aspect of city government.
Yes, I am familiar with those guys, and also Ms. Ora Watson, the former associate superintendent. She's a lady that endorsed me. I work with her with some of the schools over in the southern sector, and we have some challenges. And I've been saying that we really need to, in our schools in East Dallas and Southern Dallas, I think we need to educate more on the upper scale level as we do in the northern section.
One of the questions that we got from folks who live in the district, one person wants to know where you stand on accessory dwellings. honestly, I had to look this up. I feel like I'm a mile wide and inch deep, but accessory dwellings are smaller homes or,
Mhm.
granny flats or,
Mhm.
garage apartments, things like that, that on the same lot as a residential house. Sometimes they're used for everything from Airbnbs to letting families stay there. Where do you stand on accessory dwellings?
I have no problem with accessory dwellings. I would have to look at each issue case by case. And we're also taking a look at tiny homes, possibly that might could help out with housing the homeless. So I have no problem with it, but each case is different. If it's not violating the city ordinances, then I think it's okay. And if it looks nice and it's decent, I'm fine with it.
As far as food deserts go as well, District 7 has long been a food desert in the city of
Mhm.
Dallas, and solving that has been elusive as well for everyone who's gone through City Hall.
Yes.
You said you have a different take on homelessness since you
Mhm.
briefly experienced it there. What's the problem with solving a food desert?
Well, I think first of all, with homelessness, food deserts, whatever it might be, we've got to get in a situation with the people and we've got to bring it to pass. HEB has wanted to come to our area of town. For some reason, they have not been able to get here. I think we need to revisit, really find out why we could not get HEB, why they went north. And I really believe we could do something about the homeless system, but we're going to have to get some committees together and really take some stronger looks. I think we could get a food better grocers here if we look a little bit stronger and work with some people that have innovative minds. I don't think we have a problem.
Well, what do you think the issue is then that investors haven't brought a store? There's the Kroger there on the east or the west side of Fair Park, and
Right.
just a few of them scattered around, specifically in South Dallas.
Right.
You said we don't have a problem. Why do you think there aren't more stores?
We need leadership to talk to them. I used to talk for over 30 years. I would go talk to Donna Williams and work with Liz Minyard and to help basically in the Southeast Dallas area. At that time, we need to go back and visit those people. I know Liz Minyard is not there, but people in positions like her and see what we could do to take care of the food as it can be done.
As far as the people who've lost their job in District 7 during the pandemic, is there a role for City Hall to play in helping them find work again?
Sure. I think you can use your influence to help anyone. A leader influences other people to follow a mission. And right now, I'm using my influence to help try to get some basic labor jobs for 100 people. If they want the labor jobs, we have had maybe 20 or 30 that have accepted jobs. So, yes, we have influence.
And as far as gentrification goes, I'm sure you've seen that happening in the district, all over the district, because District 7 is so close to the skyline. What's the answer to that? Because there are a lot of people rightly concerned that they may be priced out of their homes.
Yeah, I think we can't bring any big time developers in that want to put $600,000 homes in an area that should not have homes, because it's going to cause the taxes to go up. But we need to bring developers in that are going to work with affordable housing so that people can afford. And we need to make houses more qualified, where they can get qualified to get into these affordable housing. We do need affordable housing. We do have people that are willing to work with us. This can be changed. We can put more residents in District 7. It can happen soon as possible. We just need a leader who don't mind pushing it, not making promises, but somebody that has gotten out there and did some things. I've worked for Congress also, and I've learned a lot listening and working for Congress. And I've fought many battles that I've won. And so we need a winner out there to get in and fight those battles, not making promises, but to get in from day one and just do it.
Mr. Turknett, I do stand corrected. There is a new grocery store not too far from you, the new Rio Grande grocery store, a Latin Market.
Yes, it is.
That has just recently opened as well, too. No one disputes that the district needs more of those. As always, time ticks on and marches on past us here, and we are at the end of our conversation, but I want to give you 60 seconds to directly address the voters of District 7 and the Times First now.
Thank you, and thank Buckner Terrace. I work as hard as I can from day one, and I'll be the hardest working man in business because I believe in working hard and making sure that we have economic development in District 7, and we have safety and security, and make sure that our seniors are satisfied, because a lot of them are afraid. My name is James Turner. You can look for me at yesforjames.org.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much for the time. And I was wanted to remind folks that if they are familiar with the new Rio Grande market that's in the news, it just passed council. Obviously, it hasn't opened doors yet, but is certainly good news. It's going to be over there. Mr. Turton, we appreciate the time, sir.
Thank you, Jason.
7th on the ballot. We have 2 candidates left. Number 7 on the ballot is Israel Varela, and he is with us there. Good to see you tonight. You can hear us okay, can't you? Stand by just a second, Israel. This is the virtual world we live in, just moving folks around in and out of the forum here. So stand by just a moment. We'll get you brought back in. All right. You got us now, sir?
Yes, sir.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks for being patient with us tonight. Number 7 on the ballot here. Let's talk about District 7, how long you've lived in District 7, what neighborhood you live in District 7, and what you've already done to help the community.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So my wife and I have lived here for 21 years in District 7 in the same house. We raised both of our children here. They're fully grown adults now. My son's a junior up at OU, and my daughter lives in North Carrollton, has blessed us with a 4-year-old grandson. And I live over in the Ferguson Road, Peavy area of the district. And I've been involved in raising funds for school activities, leading fundraising efforts, been involved in contributing back to the community by coaching Pee Wee sports for the youth and making sure they have good sports and exercise programs available to them to stay healthy. I've been involved in the largest Catholic men's fraternal organization in the world, volunteering and leading fundraising efforts so that way we could raise charity dollars to give back to various charitable organizations. Volunteered for the Dallas Live Homeless Shelter, the North Texas Food Bank, the Ronald McDonald House. So volunteerism has kind of been in my blood way back in the 2000s when I worked for Verizon. I helped lead the effort to raise funds for the 9/11 victims right after 9/11, where we pulled in millions of dollars in fundraising dollars for them. So I've been volunteering for the past 20 years while I've lived here.
Well, it sounds like you stay busy. So the next obvious question I would have is, why in the world would you want to go to City Hall?
That's a great question. Great question. In the last couple of years, I've witnessed crime rising exponentially, violent crime at that. Last summer, I had the unfortunate event of a young 15-year-old teenage boy shot, and watching him die in my neighbor's front lawn right here out of my house, right? This is in the middle of the day, 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon, not at 3 a.m. when we know bad things happen, right? It's the middle of the day, sunny, bright day outside. And this kind of activity has been going on all over our district and all over the city. And I'm tired of seeing our children die every day. If you don't know, District 7 is the bloodiest, deadliest district in all of Dallas. We lead in murders. 1/5 of all murders that happen in Dallas happen right here. We lead in aggravated assaults, narcotics violations, weapons violations, destruction of property, you name it. Every criminal category, we're at the top of the list. That's not something to be proud of. That needs to change. Over the past 2 decades that I've lived here in this district, I've seen things remain stagnant. I drive around and see old, dilapidated shopping centers, businesses closing up, businesses not moving to our side of town, no economic development happening here. You mentioned the new grocery store that's about to open up, which I just read the news report a couple of days ago on that. My 21-year-old son, who's in college in Oklahoma, said, well, unless they do something to solve the crime, it's not going to last, because no business wants to put their business in the highest crime district in Dallas. The Walmart that was down on I-20, they closed up shop because they had their product getting stolen every day, right? When I talk to business owners, they say, why would I put my business in the highest crime district in all of Dallas? We just saw HEB. They went to Plano and Frisco. They didn't come to Dallas or our district. Yeah. We need to solve crime and bring economic development to our side of town, solve the homelessness problem, 3 biggest issues, and also giving our children access to quality education.
Well, you mentioned the crime, and your son's probably right about this too. So how in the world do you solve crime? Do you tackle it? Is it more, cops on the street? Is it something else? Where do you see an opening?
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what it's not. It's not defunding the police. That's not solving the issue, right? As I've been knocking on doors from Far East Dallas to the Fraser Courts projects, right? Talking to cholos here in Far East Dallas, to rehab crack addict grandmothers down in the Fraser Courts projects. There's been one consistent message that they've been telling me when I ask them, what are your concerns or issues with what's happening in the community? And the consistent message has been this: I wish there was more cops in our communities to stop the crime, right? The problem has not been over policing, it's been under policing. And as a matter of fact, you know who agrees with me? President Barack Obama, in his last US mayor conferences, he stood in front of a room of mayors from all across the country, and Mayor Mike Rollins from right here in Dallas stood up and he asked, he said, is there a message you would like to send through us to the police chiefs that report to us? And Barack Obama said, in most circumstances, what these communities desperately need is good policing. You know, a lot of cities around this country, this has been historically true. The problem is not over policing, it's under policing. And that's a direct quote from Barack Obama. And then he went on to say, we don't provide opportunity. We don't do a good job of educating these kids. We don't give the parents access to jobs. And then when all hell breaks loose, we blame the police and tell them go take care of that, right? So the problem is not under police or over policing, it's under policing. We need to give the police officers the funds they need to be out in the streets. You mentioned the DPS officers here, right, that were in 2019 and again last year, right? And when they were here, if you look at the data actually shows crime began to go down, right? They removed 120 weapons off of the streets from criminals who should not have been possessing guns and other weapons. 70 of those were right here in District 7. And the current councilman, what did he do? He got on the rooftops and yelled and screamed to get the state troopers out of our communities, right? When crime is skyrocketing at an escalating pace that's unimaginable, he's yelling to get law enforcement out of our communities. That is not how you solve the criminal problem.
Mr. Varela, you mentioned we need to give the police department the funds to take care of this. Where do those funds come from, though? Because there's only, one pot of money down at City Hall, and obviously, what's been going on over the past 12 months, and tax revenues are down as well. Fortunately, the feds are stepping in, but that's just a temporary bandage. So where does the money come from to hire all these hundreds of cops back?
Well, actually, revenues are not down. Property taxes have escalated, right? Property tax, we're pulling in property taxes just fine. The sales tax have rebounded faster than anybody would have thought they would have rebounded. We've been able to offset any losses we would have had through federal assistance and federal money. So our budget revenue is just fine, right? We're not in serious danger there. When you say, where do we get these funds from? We need to take a step back and do an audit, right? The question you're asking is a great question, because whenever my wife and I decide to make a large purchase, right, the first thing we say is, where are we going to get this money from? Where can we cut? How long do we have to save? Let's figure this out. We need to do things the same way at the city level. We need to take a step back and do a full audit of all the departments and functionalities and see which areas are moving forward with the mission of the city, right? And in the areas that are not moving the city forward in our mission, we need to take funds from those areas, right? But it starts with auditing our departments and functionalities within them.
Obviously, besides, keeping the streets safe, most people just want to have, clean streets, safe streets, and maybe something to do if they can. And I've asked this to a few of the other candidates as well, too, about the lack of recreation centers, especially in Far East Dallas. They've been promised, they've been discussed for years, but these things just have not come to fruition. How do you make sure that finally happens to increase the betterment of the entire district?
Absolutely. For the past 11 years that I've held my real estate license, and probably 5 years prior to that, so we'll say 16 years, I've been hearing about all this revitalization that's going to happen around Fair Park. The development's going to happen, and all these great plans, and we're still waiting, right? I read in the news just the other day that, they're finally moving forward with phase 1 and creating all these green spaces around Fair Park. The Bushes have gone on board with the program, but they need to raise $85 million in order to do that, right? When elected to Dallas City Council, I'm going to make that my mission to ensure that we're able to raise that money to finally have a Fair Park, the crown jewel of Dallas, the crown jewel of District 7 that we could all be proud of. And then once that's done, we need to connect Buckner Terrace, right? Buckner Terrace is a hidden gem of single family homes, a unique hidden gem of single family homes. Connect Buckner Terrace to Fair Park via hiking trails and walking trails, cycling trails with pocket parks dispersed in between, so that way families can enjoy recreational outdoor space such as they do at White Rock Lake or Bachman Lake or other parts of the city, right? But I propose to be a huge proponent of that initiative.
And like most candidates, obviously want to do a lot of things, but again, it comes down to cash, whether it's public funds or public-private funds. Someone's got to go out there and find that money somewhere.
Exactly. We got to do a good job of working with the right private organizations and nonprofits to do that.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Varela. It's been District 7, as you well know, and everybody on here knows, has had trouble year after year after year convincing people to invest down there. What are people doing wrong? Why can't they successfully convince somebody that, hey, take this old dilapidated shopping center and see it for what it is? Number one, probably affordable real estate, and number two, a real opportunity.
Well, there's two sides to that, right? The first one is crime. We got to tackle the crime issue, otherwise no businesses are going to invest in here. Secondly, we got to do the job of the data analysis and research, so that way we could take to these investment companies or developers or organization businesses, right? And show them, look, there's a need in our community for your services. Here's all the data we prepared for you. It's a good thing, similar to what they did with the Costco up on 75, right? Costco wasn't going to move in there because it was going to interfere with their other locations in West Plano. And I forget the other location. But so they did all the data analysis to make that happen. We need to take that same approach with District 7 of doing that data analysis. But until we solve crime, that's going to be for naught, because until we solve crime, businesses are going to say, I'm not going to risk, having my business, in there where crime's high, my products are going to get stolen, my employees are going to get mugged and robbed and raped and killed and shot at or whatever, So crime is the hugest initiative right now in our district.
A lot of people running for District 7 seat here, and they have a lot of different backgrounds. Why are you better than any of the others as a candidate?
Absolutely. I have a business background, right? As a small business owner, as a realtor, I understand budgeting. I understand how business operates. I understand the market valuation and the effect it's having on property taxes for our families, right? And we need to come up with creative, unique, out-of-the-box ideas to solve some of these problems, right? For instance, you talked about gentrification earlier, right? And homelessness, right? As I've been talking to folks in the community, right? I've been proposing this idea of, what if we partner with a nonprofit such as Habitat for Humanity and go to some of these homeowners that have been in the community for 40 years and have some houses that, aren't up to code or need some work, and say, look, we'll fix your house for you. And in exchange, you'll allow us to board a homeless person that obviously has been vetted, right, is not dangerous and safe, and we'll pay you rent for boarding this person, right? A, they get their house fixed up so they can continue to live there. B, they get additional income, right, so they could afford the property taxes. C, we get a homeless person that might have just lost their job and just needs a hand up, and we get them in a place of a safe boarding house, so that way they could get back on their feet, right? We need to start coming up with creative, out-of-the-box ideas, right? And not just do what's always been done, because if we do what has always been done, we'll get what we've always gotten.
Yeah, I'll commend you. That's something very specific. But I'm curious why, if I own a house, why I would want anybody to come in there and live with me who might have, questionable background.
Well, you get your house fixed up, for one, at no cost to you. Two, you don't get gentrified out of the neighborhood that you've lived in for 40 years in a house that you've lived in, that you've owned for 40 years, just because you can no longer afford to pay property taxes. Three, you get to live in this community that's about to be redeveloped, and all this new development and shopping centers and retail and entertainment and the new Fair Park development going on, right? And you get to enjoy all of those amenities that you deserve, that you've lost out on over the years due to empty promises of the past, right? The communities deserve to enjoy those amenities, after living there all these years.
Right. Do you think you get people actually biting on that, though?
Everybody I talk to says, hey, that's a unique, out of the box, good idea. You know, they agree that we need to come up with creative solutions to solve some of the most challenging problems in our district and in our city.
Just a couple of moments here left, but transportation is a huge issue, and I do have one of the quiz questions on how well you know District 7. How many DART stops are there in District 7, if you know offhand? And as a bonus, we'll give you if you can tell us where they are.
Absolutely, that's a great question. In terms of transportation and DART stops, you know, that really wouldn't be an issue if we brought jobs to our district, so that way people don't have to hop on DART and spend an hour or 2 hours trying to get to their job way in Plano or Frisco or wherever jobs are at. Right. Secondly, you know, do you know where these stops are though? We're almost out of time.
Its lowest ridership in years. We now have other ride-sharing options like Lyft and Uber that people are taking advantage of now, right? So I don't think the DART issue is as big of an issue, you know, as it's portrayed to be.
Let's. We're out of time here, Mr. Varela, but I do want to give you time to address the voters directly. 60 seconds, and that starts now, sir.
Yes, absolutely. I'm asking for your vote because I propose to be a uniter, not a divider, open a good line of communication between Dallas Police, the community, and myself, so that way we could move forward as a district and as a city, so we could have safe communities in which to raise our children and enjoy outdoor parks and amenities. That's why I'm asking for your vote. You know, I'll never vote to defund the police, but I'll look for opportunities where we can improve public safety and bring economic development and opportunities to our side of town. Also looking for access to quality education for our parents in the communities. You know, kids deserve access to quality education. That's how we break the cycle of violence and poverty. As somebody who grew up in poverty myself, I understand those unique challenges, and I'm here to tackle them head on by getting your vote to be the next councilman for District 7. You go to my website at israelvarelafordallas.com.
Mr. Varela, we appreciate the time. Thank you so much. And we appreciate your patience as well, too. Being number 8 on the ballot's tough, or 7 on the ballot,
Number 7 for District 7.
7 for 7. Gotcha. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
And there is one person left. It is the incumbent, Adam Bazaldua. He is with us now. I should say thank you as well for your patience. How'd you draw number 8?
They saved the best for last, Jason.
All right. Well played. Let's start out with the same question I've asked everybody, Mr. Bazaldua, and that is how long you have lived in District 7, where you live in District 7, and finally, name something specific that you really helped the district overcome.
Thank you for the question. My wife and I bought our first home here 9 years ago to settle with our daughter, Celise, and we live just right next to the Grove Hill Cemetery in a subdivision right outside of Buckner Terrace. I consider myself to be a part of Buckner Terrace, but we're wedged between Buckner Terrace and Pecan Heights in the enclave at Grove Hill. I will talk about an issue that happened the day after the runoff election that put me in office, before I was sworn into office. And there was a huge storm that had a lot of wind and a lot of branches that impacted power lines, and a lot of people in Dallas lost power. For that, there was a need immediately for storm recovery and crisis. That was something that I immediately realized, a bully pulpit that was given to me overnight, literally. I called North Texas Food Bank. I called my friends in the restaurant industry because that's where I came from before I was a teacher. And we, in an instant, had food and resources out to both Parkdale for the eastern part of the district, and then another station down in Joppy for the community there. And we helped serve hundreds of residents in a time of need before I got into office.
I mentioned at the beginning of the forum how active District 7 is and always runs a lot of folks for the offices, but you were number 8 of 8 on a ballot. Why in the world do you think you drew so many opponents?
You know, that's a good question. I will say that I'm always about glass being half full. And last cycle, we had 9 candidates. So I look at this as an improvement. And I think that we will continue to make progress in District 7 as we move forward.
But is there something you think, well, let me ask it like this. Why are you running for reelection? What work remains at City Hall that you want to personally tackle?
Well, there's a ton that still needs to happen with District 7. District 7 is very unique in that we are a vastly diverse district, both in race and in socioeconomics. We have basically the tale of two cities in one district line. One of the things that we have not had is representation that has the work ethic and the will to do what it takes to represent all parts, every corner. And that's something that I've been very diligent to, and I want to continue to. I want to make sure that we approach budget needs with an equity lens, and we start really addressing issues that have been systemically placed into the communities that I serve.
Unlike everyone else who's running, essentially, you are running on a record now too. Let's talk about the record. Where do you think that you could have done better during this term, and where do you think the biggest the biggest medal goes for your accomplishments?
Well, as a former educator, I would be fooling myself if I'd say that there wasn't room for improvement. Always, I need to be willing to evaluate what I've done and what I could do better. I feel that there's a struggle to try to be in every place at once. And I need to be better about delegating and extending my spider web, if you will, so that I can essentially be more than one place at once without really being there. I also would like to say that I would like to take more of an opportunity to learn the intricacies of each department and in a hands-on way, like I did with some of them, but I did not with the majority of them with City Hall. And if I would like to give some touts, I brought the biggest economic development deal that has come to District 7 in more than a decade, bringing more jobs than any council person has brought in more than a decade. That's something that I'm proud of. Bringing 2 grocery stores in one council term to the district, that's something that I'm proud of. And then another thing that I'm very proud of is leading the charge to increase the hourly wage employees for the city of Dallas to $15 an hour for both part-time and full-time.
Let's talk for a moment about the grocery stores, because I've asked most every candidate about this. You've heard probably specifically from these investors on why they are now willing to take a chance on District 7. What are they saying that District 7 is doing right, and what are they saying District 7 is doing wrong?
I don't necessarily hear about the district in context as you've posed the question. What I will say is that the district itself hasn't done anything wrong, but there has been a lot of components to add to why grocery stores haven't survived, which is why it was necessary for the city of Dallas to invest in communities that have been underinvested in. I think it was important to work with economic development and come up with strategic plan that gave us the ability to be a partner with these developers and put in stipulations to this deal to make sure that this grocery store has signed on to be here for 15 years. So we're not going to see what we've seen with a quick turnover in grocery stores, to make sure that we can require a certain livable wage with the jobs that are being offered, and not just say that we're bringing jobs to the district, but we're bringing livable wage jobs to the district. And then being able to make sure that we are doing certain improvements that's going to prohibit nefarious activities from occurring on the property. All of those things give us that ability, and we don't have that ability if we just allow for it to be up to the free market. We need to be able to engage into these private partnerships and dictate with what's going on and what needs to go on in the areas of concern.
Mr. Basildua, you made some news several months back about wanting to cut the Dallas Police Department overtime budget. Looking back now, was that a mistake?
No, sir. It wasn't a mistake. The voters of Dallas voted me in for accountability and transparency. And that's something that I promised them. It's something that I feel that I've delivered on. It was an accountability exercise. And that accountability exercise put 95 officers back on the street in faster way than we would ever have been able to hire them. It was also something that was done with a caveat and assurance by our city manager and our chief financial officer that we do have a reserve fund in case it was needed. We would never have done something, and we made it very clear, that would hinder our police department because we support our law enforcement. I support our law enforcement. But what we had was a runaway overtime budget, and we had no accountability and nobody who was willing to put the pressure on management to do so. So not only do we now have a new chief who is committed to getting that overtime under control, we also have 95 more officers during this fiscal year budget that we never would have had assisting on our beat when we know we have a rise in violent crime. That's about being innovative. That's about not folding to political pressure. So people have mentioned my billboard, and I can say that that was not put up by the police department. And that was mentioned. I want to make that clear. That was put up by a political action committee. And that is not something that is going to deter me from doing what I promised to do to the voters, which is hold the departments accountable. And the police department is no different than any other department in the city.
Everyone has said on here too, which you would probably agree, that probably the biggest issue facing District 7, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you tell me, is crime. Is that one of the biggest issues or the biggest issue?
I would say that public safety is, yes.
Public safety? Considering the crime numbers that District 7 has and leads with, unfortunately, not something they want to brag about, what's the answer, and why haven't you been able to help bring those numbers down?
Well, I can tell you that there are two things that I'd like to say on that. At the same time that you said crime is rising, I can also tell you that we have more officers year over year. So I can say that the answer, the silver bullet, is not just that it's more officers. We have to do more to assist our officers. We have to look at what it is that we can do for our officers, which is exactly what I did with that overtime reallocation. By putting more officers away from administrative jobs. I heard a lot on this call about, on this forum so far, about the deficit of officers. The reality is, in 2008, when this city hit a recession, we made a commitment to our police department that we would not fire or lay off uniformed officers. But in order to make that happen, we did lay off all of the civilian positions. So now what we have is $85,000 officers that are sitting behind desks, over 600 of them, being paid with the most experience, the most tenure, that could be helping with our crazy response times and the real need for focusing on law enforcement work. So bringing in other solutions, it doesn't have to be taking away from law enforcement. The $1.5 million to put towards lighting on the mayor's task force recommendation on lighting was another part that came from that reallocation of overtime. That was in targeted areas that we knew high violent crime was occurring in our district. I'm proud to say that as of now, we have seen in those target areas crime down as low as 45%. As of at the end of March, we're set to be month to date down 15% in violent crime in this year. And I think that it's important for those to be highlighted and for us to realize that these changes are not going to happen overnight, but they're going to happen by us being accountable.
Let me ask you one more question here in the final couple of minutes, and that is code enforcement. One of the biggest news tips we get all the time is about the lack of enforcement from the codes department. And this is not something that has just happened the past couple of years here. This has been going on for years and years down there. You now have experience at City Hall. What in the heck is the problem?
Great question. Again, we can go back to the mayor's task force on violent crime, and let's talk about root causes. There's a lot of disparity in quality of life issues that contribute to public safety as a whole. So when we look at code enforcement, and a lot of what I was hearing in the campaign trail was that we don't have enough code enforcement officers, right, that we don't get service requests answered here, and things of that nature. Well, the reality is, when I got into office, I pulled data and people from our district weren't putting service requests in. I mean, at the number, I'm not saying that we didn't have any, but we've almost by 200 to 300% increased the amount of service requests, because I know it's not an answer that constituents like to hear. But what I can tell anyone that tells me this occurs or this occurs is, did you call 311? Did you put it in our Dallas? Because if you didn't, I have no data when budget season comes up to show TC Broadnex that I have X amount of service requests. I need you to give me X amount of more resources. And so this is all about making sure that there's an education to the constituents to get the right resources. And that's all going to be data driven. So it's a slow process and we're going to get there. But we also did bring a $1 million independent department from code enforcement to address illegal dumping specific to the southern sector this fiscal year budget as well.
All right, we are out of time with our conversation with you, Mr. Basil, but you get 60 seconds to directly address voters, and that time starts now.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you to all of the sponsors that made tonight possible. I am asking for your vote for re-election. It's been an honor and a privilege for the past 2 years to serve District 7. I think that we have made great strides despite big challenges over the past 2 years. We depleted our land bank inventory with over 400 lots that were taken off. We put $32 million into public safety initiatives that didn't require taking money away from our police department. We held police accountable, which in turn gave us new leadership and hope with a new direction that we are headed. I led the charge to increase minimum wage for our hourly employees in the city of Dallas. And I was the author of the COVID eviction ordinance that protected thousands of Dallasites from being removed from their home during the pandemic. I know that we can make more progress if I'm given more time, and I'm asking for your vote to do it.
All right, sounds good. We appreciate you you joining us, obviously, and thanks for being patient as well, being the 8th on the ballot here too. That concludes. I've been doing this 3 or 4 years. I always appreciate you guys asking me back, because I'm super impressed with the amount of civic activity that happens in District 7. So I'll leave it at that. I do want to make sure that we point out who helped organize this. There were a number of organizations in Far East Dallas and South Dallas that did that, including Buckner Terrace, Ferguson Road Initiative, Parkdale, Pecan Heights, Dolphin Heights, and the Greater East Dallas Chamber of Commerce. All of them worked together to help organize and pull this together. 3 quick dates to point out. Thursday is the last day to register to vote in the May 1st election. April 19th is when early voting begins. If you're like me, you like to vote early so you don't have to stand in line potentially on election day. But election day is on Saturday, May 1st. So if you know anyone who's not registered to vote, Thursday's the last day. Get them out there. And thanks so much for joining us this evening. We appreciate it.